talk and support. Okay, to move on to our main topic today. Last year at this time, we had a similar meeting theme last September. And we touched on curriculum issues, student mental health, school safety, security, and school facility improvements. Since then, PVPUSD welcomed a new supervisor, Dr. Serrano. The facilities have not improved, and the far right continues to try to change the school narrative to book banning and student pronouns. This past week, I have heard from several sources that the Peninsula High School and the district handled a student's fake gun post on social media very effectively without having to close the schools. So it's important to note that this was done because someone turned somebody in from social media, and it was dealt with in a way that the rest of the students weren't impacted. So those are all good things, and I know our speakers are going to talk about more good things as well as things that we have to work on. So speaking on these issues and also the bills that have recently passed by our state legislature that are awaiting Newsom's signature, we have a notable panel today. First is Dr. Sara Deen. She's the PVPUSD board member elected to a 4-year term in 2022 and the president of the South Coast Interfaith Council. So you can come up when I introduce you, come up to the panel, and then when we start, you'll come here and speak. Muratsuchi, Assembly member and chair of the Education Committee and advocate for our schools. We also have Tim Coleman, president of the Palos Verdes Faculty Association and a Penn High School teacher. I just want to note that Tim held a fabulous, as well as these other people, but anyway, Tim held a fabulous TEDx talk at Peninsula High School 5 years ago. You can catch it on the internet, and it was titled, "If You Can Do, Teach," to inspire his students and encourage more to go into teaching. Jim Roos, mayor of Palos Verdes Estates, he could not be here. He caught COVID, called me, they called this morning, his husband called. They think he caught it when the PVE hosted a town hall at the PV Golf Club on Wednesday, and there's a lot of people in the room. So if he had felt better, he would have been on Zoom, but I haven't seen him, so I'm assuming he's not feeling very well. But he had attended the PVPUSD March 8th meeting because his 5th grader told him to talk in support of the 5th grade teachers who some parents wanted to discipline over LGBTQ plus themed book. Also, we want to welcome Paul DiCarmine, who also has COVID, so he's on Zoom, founder of Reasonable Parents of PV, a Facebook group. Paul talked to us in May about how he got activated to create Reasonable Parents, a nonpartisan grassroots group of PV parents, teachers, and school staff collaborating to ensure the PVPUSD policies are evidence-based and grounded in objective truth and reason. And Paul will be speaking to us via Zoom. So the way it's going to work today is each panelist will speak for about 5 minutes in the order that I just introduced them. And then they will have an opportunity to ask each other a question, each of the panelists, if something comes up. And then we'll go to questions from the audience. And the way the questions from the audience will work is, I know we've been talking and sometimes people in the audience, people on Zoom don't hear you. So I will have a mic. And so when you have a question in the audience, you'll have to come to the mic. And that way people on Zoom will hear everything, especially because one of our panel members are on Zoom. And I just want to check back with the Zoom people. Can I just get a hands up or thumbs up that you guys can hear us okay? Okay, very good. All right. All right, so you guys can, Sarah, you'll talk first, okay? You can talk at the podium. Oh. That way you're.
If I close this, it'll close the screen, won't it?
Except that that's our camera.
Oh,
Is it okay?
how can I make it work? The shift over? Sorry. Well, hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
The room is awake still, I think, I hope. I'm really overdressed right now, but it kind of speaks to the occasion. I attended a gala this morning in Long Beach to support a nonprofit that promotes and opens up schools to educate girls in rural Pakistan. And as some of you know my personal story, my name is Sara, Deen. I was elected to the Palos Verdes Peninsula School Board last year. As a reminder, I'm speaking only as an individual today. I'm not authorized to speak on behalf of the school board or the school district. I happen to be registered as a Democrat, which I think is okay. But my husband just showed up. Thanks, Dean, for being here. Yeah, yeah, so my dad immigrated from Pakistan in 1970. He was recruited. He got a letter from the U.S. Embassy saying that he had scored in the top whatever percentile, and the United States was looking for bright young people like him. Would he like to attend a university here? And he said, boy, would I. And that's why I'm here. I was born in California, born and raised through our public schools, but I have had a close connection to my parents' homeland of Pakistan. I've traveled there frequently. I was there last year, and I very closely understand how important it is to maintain equitable and excellent public schools where all kids have access to the same quality education. So this is really important to me, and it's why I ran for school board. So I was, like I said, born and raised in California. I used to practice dentistry, and then after 9/11, after the attacks in San Bernardino and Paris, there was unfortunately a rise in anti-Muslim bias, and Muslim families were feeling really insecure and unsure of how to protect their kids in our schools. So I started holding town halls and gatherings to help a largely immigrant community understand that they have a voice in our system and how they could advocate for their kids. This led me into doing work with the local Jewish community because a local rabbi said, I know how you feel. Our community's been through it. That got me into interfaith work, which eventually drew me into social justice work, and that's how I haphazard found my way into politics. But my dad gave up everything, absolutely everything, because he fell in love with this idea of this country, which is really grounded in that First Amendment, the idea that you don't have to hold certain beliefs and practices to be included in this extraordinary project. And that's what I'm hoping to continue to help our public schools do. It isn't perfect, but as long as we keep working towards it without distraction, I think there's hope. We do have a crisis right now as it relates to public education. And it's not only in public education. The two things that I think are most pressing right now are negative partisanship and political polarization. There's a really great book written, yes, a liberal, Ezra Klein. He wrote a book, I think it's called Why We Are Polarized. And he talks about how today, one of the most challenging things is dealing with the idea that people are now animated, not because they believe in their party, not because they're inspired or moved to build something, but because they're so angry with the other party. And so it's coming from this very angry, vitriolic place. So that's one piece, I think, that's really hitting us in public schools. And political polarization. The truth is, when one group, and I don't know, it's a chicken or egg argument, who went further this way or that way first, I don't know. But I'll tell you what it looks like right now in public schools. When Governor DeSantis does something in Florida, and if a school board member or school official gets a call, DeSantis just did this, let's do X. Either let's do the opposite of DeSantis or let's do what DeSantis did. Either one of those things undermines public education and our children's interests. So I cannot serve, and I don't think it is in the best interest of our kids to serve in a manner where we're either being pro someone else, pro another state, anti another state, or anti another group. And what happens is this negative partisanship and severe political polarization is distracting us, and we can't address the very real gaps in our schools. And there are real gaps in our schools because we are spreading that public dollar oh so thin, and we're meeting the learning needs of an increasingly diverse group. The learning needs of our community continue to diversify as we welcome more and more kids who have special needs, as we welcome people with English language needs, as we welcome more and more people from different backgrounds and starting points. And we still haven't recouped our investment in public education since the 2008 recession. We've actually never returned to that same level of investment. It's for a side conversation. Oh my gosh, is that my 5 minutes?
Oh,
well, hopefully I can.
No, keep going. It's
Okay, I'll try to bring it around and
Don't
then.
worry.
Okay, sorry. 5 minutes just goes by like that.
I didn't know you had a time.
Well, because some of us can go on and on. So, when I think about what really is a crisis in our schools right now, it's the teacher shortage. That is a huge problem. We are short-staffed special ed teachers. Those are kids that we are not able to serve wholeheartedly every single day. We should be talking about that. Special ed funding. The federal government mandates that we offer every kid with whatever special needs a free and accessible and excellent education like everyone else, but doesn't mandate it. California's mechanism of funding special education is, I'm going to use an inappropriate word, it's poor, it's pathetic. That's a huge problem. We need to find ways to better fund our special ed kids. Our school facilities in California, as our students know, they're deplorable. And we are facing, climate change has led to an increasing heat wave. There used to be a time where you didn't need air conditioning on the Hill. We're not there anymore. And our facilities are really old. And the state we really don't have a reasonable means of funding these facilities needs. Those are the things we really should be talking about. But unfortunately, the media and partisanship is keeping the public's attention focused on only one thing, trans kids. And it's interesting because if you look at the law, nothing new has happened recently that warrants this, except for changes in the social discourse. George Floyd's killing rocked the country and was a racial awakening for us. Many of us, myself included, took the time to go, whoa, I knew something was going on, that things weren't always fair, but I took time to read books recommended by Black friends and said, help me understand how you experience this country, how you understand the world. All of a sudden, Americans started questioning hierarchies and systems, and this poses a challenge for people who benefit from the status quo. So initially, folks on the right were using CRT to demonize discussions around race in America, and it wasn't particularly effective because there's enough of us people of color to go, yeah, it's not easy, and there are things that are unfair. When we focus on trans kids, it's easier to distract the audience because there's fewer of us. That's a smaller group of people, right? As a Muslim, I know if you don't know a Muslim, the chances of you holding anti-Muslim bias are much higher. When you know someone from a group, it's harder to be bigoted. It's harder to hold bias. The reason it's easier to propel misinformation and get an avalanche of media storm around trans kids because it is a smaller group of people. We're talking about 1.3% of our youth population. And like I said, nothing major has changed in many years. In 2010, Health and Safety Code 124260 was signed by Governor Schwarzenegger. That is what empowered 12-year-olds to consent to their own mental health treatment. That happened in 2010. That's what shut parents out of the therapist's room. I don't hear anyone talking about that because I think therapists don't have a union, and that union doesn't fund the Democratic Party. So we don't hear complaints about therapists. 2010, the FAIR Act was passed, which calls for the inclusion of LGBTQ stories and other minorities and underrepresented groups in our curriculum. That happened in 2010. It's been in effect for a long time. I think I'll stop there because I'm guessing we're going to do questions and answers. But I just want to remind us that we are not France. We are not dogmatic about secularism. We do not prohibit our people from forming religious beliefs or practicing their faith. We're not Iran, where we impose a particular belief or practice either. We are very unique because of the First Amendment. And what I would enjoin my fellow Democrats, and I'm being really honest, and you guys might cancel me for it, but I have to say it. Post-Trump's election, this party welcomed a lot of Muslims and lots of other groups of color. And my community, Muslims, they love the Party for the Inclusion, for this attitude of expanding the table and not requiring people to believe a certain way or to live a certain way to be included. And when we start veering into mandating that people have to hold certain beliefs and practices, we're crossing that First Amendment line. So let's continue to be the party that welcomes everyone because of our shared values in democracy and the First Amendment and inclusion. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
So we have Assemblymember Muratsuchi.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Deen, Mr. Coleman, great to join you on this wonderful discussion that we're having today. And I look forward to having a discussion because I know that there's a lot of interest on some of these issues that that are going to be the subject matter of today's meeting. Let me start off by saying that you know, as a parent, as a former school board member, and now as chair of the Assembly Education Committee, education has always been one of my top priorities. I'm not only the son of immigrants, but also a first-generation university graduate. And I know from my personal experience how education has allowed me, this, I was a military brat. My father worked for the United States Army as a civilian. He was stationed out in the little island of Okinawa. And, I never thought this kid from Okinawa would someday have the privilege of representing a wonderful community like Palos, Verdes in the California State Legislature. And that's all because of the power of education to change lives. And I'm living proof of that. And so, my main goal as the chair of the Assembly Education Committee is to work toward the goal for every child to have the same kind of opportunities that I've had for public education to change their lives so that they can have the opportunities to transform their lives, regardless of where they live, regardless of what their zip code is. And that is my overall goal as, and not only as your state representative, but also as the chair of the Assembly Education Committee. This year, as Dr. Deen talked about, while we should be focusing more on, how do we recover the learning loss that so many of our children, so many of our communities saw during the pandemic, or addressing another issue that Dr. Deen touched upon, the teacher and school employee workforce crisis, the shortage that we have. We had a teacher shortage crisis before the pandemic started, and the pandemic only made it worse. On top of that, we saw coming out of the pandemic the ongoing escalation of a teenage youth mental health crisis. That had started, whether we can debate whether there's cause and effect, but it really started around the time that social media and smartphones started taking off with our teenagers, but it really dramatically escalated during the pandemic. But even with that, what the U.S. Surgeon General declared as a national crisis in teenage mental health, we can't hire enough mental health counselors. We can't hire enough mental health professionals to support our kids. Los Angeles Unified, they had more than enough money to hire more mental health counselors, but they can only fill like a third of their positions. And that's just, one of many examples of how, we have this ongoing workforce shortage crisis in our public schools. But unfortunately, too much of this year's focus in terms of our public education debates this year have been focusing on what everyone's been calling the culture wars. Attacks on LGBTQ youth, attacks on books that are trying to recognize and educate and elevate the awareness of the experiences of LGBTQ youth, of learning more about communities of color through critical race theory. Actually, I can correct myself, but we're not even teaching critical race theory in our schools. I actually, learned critical race theory when I went to law school. That's actually a very specialized legal theory that isn't even taught in our K-12 public schools. But the proponents of the those that were calling for bans of books, for example, in Temecula Unified School District, they attempted to, the school board initially refused to adopt textbooks because it mentioned one of the historic LGBTQ civil rights leaders, Harvey Milk, and that was a violation of a state law, that the FAIR Act that Dr. Deen mentioned, which was passed back, I believe it was in 2012, I'm not sure what the date was. You can probably research it, Dr. Deen. But it was a law that was passed to ensure that no school district, no school board, was taking actions to discriminate or to, in this case, ban books because it was trying to address a perspective that is, part of the rich diversity that is the state of California. And so we saw how districts, one after another, were starting to adopt the same playbook. Temecula, Orange Unified in Orange County, Chino Valley, Rockland. There was that big debate. I believe it was at the Glendale School District where we saw, these unfortunate, violent confrontations between the proponents of the different camps, and clearly not being good role models for our students, to not be able to express our opinions in a civil way, right, but to have to resort to violence. Those issues have unfortunately come to the forefront when we really should be focusing on, the core issues of how do we make sure that we keep our schools, among the best in the state. How do we make sure that we are meeting the needs of our students, not only academic needs, but also mental health needs, social, emotional needs. So that has been taking a lot of our attention in the state legislature. There was one bill that I was proud to support, Assembly Bill 1078, which was a bill that was trying to address this trend of book banning. It took the approach that if a school district, tries to ban a book, such as, in Temecula, where they try to ban a book because, their board felt that it was offensive to have gay rights leader Harvey Milk and lessons about Harvey Milk included in their social studies textbook, that was a violation of the FAIR Act that was passed to ensure that the diverse perspectives, diverse experiences of Californians, are reflected in our history, in our social studies, in our other textbooks. That when a school district does that parents can file a complaint directly with the State Department of Education, with the state superintendent, and that can lead to consequences for a violation of that FAIR Act. Now, we can talk about issues of whether books may be age appropriate or not. I know that that has been one of the key concerns of the parents' rights movement. And I know that there was a discussion right here in Palos Verdes Unified about a specific book that was read by a fifth grade teacher, trying to address issues of LGBTQ issues. But I want to make it clear that here in the state of California, we stand in support of making sure that our students learn the rich and diverse histories of all Californians, including the LGBTQ. We want to make sure that all students feel supported, students feel included. And we do see this very troubling trend where we need to fight back against these organized efforts that are trying to send messages to our LGBTQ youth in particular, that somehow they're not welcome. I think we need to keep in mind, first and foremost, that our public schools are for all California kids. We want to be inclusive of all California kids. And that is my main goal, not only as your state representative, but as the chair of the Assembly Education Committee. I look forward to having discussions. I'm sure there are some parents in the audience that may disagree with me. Look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tim Coleman. I am the president of the Palos Verdes Faculty Association. I'm a teacher at Mensa High School, where I just started my 20th year or 21st year. At a certain point, I stopped paying attention. It's my 30th year of teaching, 20 years there. Prior to that, I was in PVPUSD at Jefferson High School, which is in South Los Angeles, very different place. And when I came to Palos Verdes, I felt the first day I was there, we had a teacher in-service day, so no students had a luncheon afterwards put on by the PTSA. And I had one of those moments like, hey, somebody pinched me. I think I might get hit by a bus, because it was such a different world coming to this school district from LAUSD. I loved teaching in the city. I loved LAUSD. The kids were fantastic, really rewarding, but the district at the time was pretty bad place, poorly run. It showed. So coming here was a revelation, because this is a community that values education, and you can see what it means when schools work together to try to get students where they need to be. PV, we do that as well as I've seen it anywhere. So there are a few things on the horizon from in
1
terms
minute, Tim,
Yep.
can just ask the Zoom audience if they can hear. You just
Zoom, can you hear me? I mean, we in?
yeah, lean
Okay,
in.
all right. So a few things I wanted to talk about. Al already touched on it. Funding issues are still a problem. I don't know how much you know about California's funding, but our base grant is not the same as everybody's base grant. So things are somewhat better more recently, but with LCFF funding, our district, while it's not the lowest funded district in California, this is often been funded, we're not that far from the bottom. So in fairness, we are far too low funded. I personally think that the state would do well to look at districts like ours, ask questions about whether we can't raise the base grant to an even place for all. When LCFF came out, supplemental grants, I thought those were great ideas because I've seen what it's like in PVPUSD. I know that districts like big urban districts need a lot more money to do what they do. If I had my way, they would get twice that. And our funding would be something like many of the states on the East Coast that spend as much as twice on a student per year than California is. So the state itself is still relatively low ranked in terms of overall spending. So funding, equalization is something that I know many of you have probably been on Capital Convoy or have participated in that, and we are familiar with the argument. My history is still not. I do think the union, CTA, and PVPA, we spend a lot of our energy defending what teachers are doing in the classroom. And it's, weird in some ways because I feel like there's never been more transparency with regard to what we do in the classroom. There's never been time. I do think things have changed very much since when I was in high school, or even when I started teaching. Classrooms now, I think, are far better places for students. And our kids, I know we've talked a lot about mental health. The students we have now are pretty remarkable regarding how they treat each other. It's fantastic to see the openness and kindness of students to one another. It's a very different generation. But I do think we spend 90% of our time on social issues and discussions, and then we leave off other things like funding or all of the inequities that we see. I wish we could have as much energy for discussion about the fact that pieces of concrete the size of footballs fall on our buildings and land on benches that kids sit on. And as we do about all of the minutiae. And so that's my main issue. School choice is at an all-time high. Last year was the biggest year for school choice. So, in other words, last year was the first year, or the biggest year, and I think it's as many as 10 states now have laws that give public funds to directly to parents to opt out of public education. As a public educator and as a firm believer in public education, I think this is a really frightening sign. It's something we need to be aware of, and it's something that we need to forcefully push back against. Fully on board for listening to the community and trying to deliver what the community wants with regard to public education, but to give public dollars to people to take kids out of schools is just another attempt to break public education. And it would absolutely 100% they would all be punishable. Public education is the only thing we have with regard to equalizing the playing field. Because, like many of you, I became a Democrat because of democratic fiscal policies. I believe in a country that takes care of its most needy, and want the party to be laser focused on this still around. We talk about everything else. So one last thing, I know some of you may not know, Janus was a law that basically took what used to be a closed shop for California unions. All of our teachers were at minimum kind of subsistence members of the union by have an option. Now teachers have to opt into the union. You couldn't before Janus even opt out. I just wanted you to know Janus gets a lot of talk. Palos Verdes, we now have currently the highest union membership we have ever had. So if you're worried like Janus wiped us out, we did the opposite. Janus solidified our vision. It made us rethink our position with regard to members. As a union president, I'm much more active in going out and talking to new members, explaining what the union is about. So the good news is Janus didn't destroy our union in the future. That's all I had.
Okay, so next we're going to have Paul DiCarmine on Zoom, and we're going to highlight him, and he has slides to share. I do see the chat where you're not hearing us. Do you hear me now? Okay.
I can hear you okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Um,
I guess Tim has the voice. I don't know. It echoed. On Zoom. Tim says he gets that a lot. Okay, but we're gonna get, showcase Carmen.
all right. Can everyone hear me okay and see the slides?
Yeah.
Great.
Wait, we haven't seen your slides yet.
Pardon?
We haven't seen your slides yet.
They're not. Oh, okay. One more click.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay, we're good.
What do you see? A title slide?
Yes.
All right. Well, I apologize for not attending in person. I have COVID. Not the only one today on the panel, which was interesting to hear. So thank you for inviting me to join this esteemed and accomplished panel today. I'm Paul DiCarmine, and my wife and I founded a Facebook group called Reasonable Parents of Palos Verdes about 2 years ago. To be clear, I am a founder of a Facebook group. I'm not the president of anything. We're just not that kind of group. So first I have to tell you that I'm not a Democrat. And just to be clear, it's the same joke as last time. I'm also not a Republican. And the Reasonable Parents of Palos Verdes group is nonpartisan. This is a critical feature of our group, so please forgive me if I go a little overboard in making that point. So we started as an online discussion group on the internet. It can be hard to talk about challenging topics without getting overrun by flame wars. But this is one thing that our group does really well. It turns out that when you have high quality, open discussion with reasonable people, you can build connection, engagement, and involvement in the community. I am sure that everyone in this room knows that. You do exactly that, but we're doing it on the internet. The last time I spoke to this group, I talked about some of the things that the members of our Facebook group have done, individually and collectively. Excuse me. Recently, the school board undertook what is probably the most consequential thing a school board can do. They hired a new superintendent. And in our group, we had many good discussions about this, about the search firm, about the search process, and most importantly, about the qualities in a superintendent that would best serve the district and our kids. These discussions enabled individuals from our group to participate in the survey and take the the stakeholder meetings in informed and meaningful ways. And we hope that our input helped the board to select the right person for the job. Now we're looking forward to seeing what Dr. Serrano can bring to PVPUSD and how we can support her as individuals and as parents in strengthening public education in PV and in her stated goal of making PV the #1 district in the state. So to get there, to get to #1, we need the schools to run and for our district to operate without getting sucked into political culture wars. We've seen it happen in nearby districts, and the culture wars came to our district back in March. Thankfully, it didn't get too far. The community came out and stood up for teachers and students. But to protect our district from further escalations, we need to understand why it is happening. One reason is that it is a tactic to draw attention and power to fringe groups and unpopular ideas, to divide, to polarize us into our political camps, and to exploit fear. And it's not healthy. At best, it's a distraction from doing the real work to maintain and build up our schools. And at worst, it's physically dangerous, people can get hurt, and it can undermine parents' trust in public education. So we must remember that those instigating the culture wars exist in the fringes. They're a minority. And it is very dangerous to take the mental shortcuts and fall into stereotyping and to be putting people with different opinions into boxes, because you can't run a successful public school district if the community is divided in two. You can't run a successful public school district if you allow 40 to 45% of the families in your catchment to feel alienated. These results are from the 2020 presidential election. This misleading map, published by the New York Times, makes it look like all of LA County is blue. And parts of LA County are indeed very blue. But the Palos Verdes Peninsula is essentially purple. We can see a little red blip in the middle of the peninsula. But if you look at the switchbacks here, for example, the difference between this area being red and blue is less than 150 votes. And the same is basically true across the peninsula. So the point is that the community needs to trust in the schools to do right by us and our kids, no matter who is in the top office. Our wonderful principal at my child's school said during the Meet the Principal event, every child, every day. She, of course, wasn't talking about politics, but I can't think of a better way to frame the solution. Here are some things that, excuse me, I believe most parents care about with respect to their children, regardless of who they vote for, in no particular order. Mental health and student wellness, facilities, air conditioning and plumbing, representation, student safety, gun violence, earthquake, and wildfire readiness, academics. Now, that one should go without saying, but sometimes it doesn't. And that we may disagree on how to address and solve these issues and at what level of resources to allocate to them. But these are some of the things that matter to almost everyone. And they are solvable with the required focus and effort. They are not solvable if we are divided. So how do we sidestep the culture wars in PV? I think one way to do it is by fighting fire and fear with facts. This is how reasonable parents got started, fighting COVID misinformation with facts. And we continue to do that in our group. For example, during the last school board election, there was a lot of doom and gloom about school finances. So some of our members dissected the district budget and explained the nuances of it. And that empowered individuals in our group to engage with their larger networks to push back against bad information with facts. How can the district do that? One way is something that I call active transparency. Part of that is making information available before it is needed, getting ahead of parents' concerns, and technically, much of the information required to understand how the district operates is public information. The other part is the accessibility of this information. It's not just enough that it's out there, it has to be easy to get and easy to understand. I think the district is already making good strides in this direction. They've started emailing and making available on the district website highlights from the school board meetings. It can be tough to follow these meetings when they're live, so it's been helpful in improving communication and transparency. I understand the Budget Advisory Committee will be releasing quarterly budget overviews, and I think this will go a long way in helping community understand the district finances and dispelling rumors of grave financial problems. The Educational Services team has been doing curriculum webinars that are incredibly informative for anyone who has questions about what exactly is being taught in our schools. Now, is this going to satisfy the fringe? Of course not. They're not going to watch a 1-hour webinar on social studies to get their facts straight. But I believe that it does limit their reach and their potential audience, and it gives reasonable people tools to push back against bad information. So, after we all work together to solve the culture wars, what's next? I think the next most important thing on the horizon is ensuring that the 2 school board seats up for grabs in the next election are won by reasonable people, and that we give Dr. Serrano the best chance and support that she needs to make PVPUSD the #1 district in the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, and I know that was hard because he has COVID. That's why he's drinking. Okay, before we go to the panel where you guys are going to ask, and I have some questions as well, we do have another speaker. So I'd like to invite our student board member of the PVPUSD up, Sydney Iravenchi. Am I saying it right? Anyway, she has something to share with you in terms of what it means to be a student board member of PVPUSD.
Speak into this microphone.
I can just hold it.
Put it up here. How's that? That works.
Great.
Hello, my name is Sydney Iravenchi, and I'm the student board member of Palos Verdes Peninsula High School. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss what I believe are the top concerns of students today. It was a pleasure to be here and to hear from amazing community leaders. As an active member of the Principal Advisory Club, co-president of the PVPUSD Student Council, and student representative at Capitol Convoy, I'm well acquainted with the concerns of our students. Our school's facilities, mental health, and college/future are the top 3 concerns that students express the most frequently. This is proven by data that was gathered last year in a survey across all 3 high schools, where we found that 88.8% said that school was their top stressor, followed by 73.6% for college and future as their top stressor. Students from both high schools often complain and point out our outdated buildings on campus. With the campus being many decades old, some classrooms do not have adequate heating or cooling equipment to make an environment suitable for learning. As Dr. Deen said, a quality education is important for all students, and that simply cannot be achieved in these types of environments. Thank you to Mr. Muratsuchi, who has already advocated for the need for funding for our facilities and helped us get $500,000 for bathrooms last year. Another issue of concern for many students is mental health, specifically the pressure to balance the social life, academics, athletics, and extracurricular activities. The problem with this pressure is that students are not taught how to cope or balance such a busy schedule. The community can support this by pushing an opening of an alcove in our PV community, which was discussed previously last year. Alcove Beach Cities is a free mental health resources for kids aged 12 to 25, which offers fun events, mental health support, life skills, and a safe place to go, all for free. I believe this will have a huge impact on the thousands of students here in our district. Something that I am currently working on to combat this mental health problem right here in our school is starting our first ever SAGE advisory group. In collaboration with the SAGE therapists on our campus, we will have students create videos and events to destigmatize students seeking help. I'm hoping this can change the culture on our campus about students who need mental health support. I also want to highlight that 86.7% of students across all high schools have said that they have a trusted person on campus to go to if needed. So thank you to teachers like Dr. Coleman, who make another safe space for students to go to. Lastly, students often feel stressed about college in the future. Things like how to do taxes, creating a resume, and finding the right path after high school are some areas students wish to have more information on. A great way to solve this problem is by having parents, teachers, and people that work in the community to share their story and offer their knowledge. By listening and seeing members of the community find students can find success in their own way, as our principal, Dr. Kuykendall, often says to our students. We can also push for the addition of a finance class in order for students to graduate high school. With this, students can be assured that they are leaving with enough knowledge to succeed in life. Our districts and high schools have done an amazing job of tackling these issues over the years that students voice their concerns over. We can all work together to make our community the best for our students, both now and in the future. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to go to questions first between our panelists, and then we'll go to the audience. So should I move this out, Reggie? Should I move so they can see each other? Can I do that? Maybe just a little bit. And that way also this. Okay. Is that all right? Okay, so does, who would like to go first? Anybody? Do you have a question for anything that was said on, because I do, so I can start? Okay, I'll start. All right. All right, my first thing is to Dr. Sara Deen. And actually everybody was talking about funding, but nobody talked about the Peninsula Education Fund, which funds our counselors and arts and music. And I was wondering, in terms of counselors, we are heavily supported here by people who are in high school, but there's only 2 counselors in middle school and no counselors in elementary school. And I was wondering, does that get brought up?
Anybody want to talk to them? Okay, you can.
So I'm a Peninsula Education Foundation ambassador, so I help raise money and promote donations from our community members. And I've discussed with Mrs. Miller, who kind of runs the student aspect of that. And we raise a lot of money. I believe we raise about $2 million every year. However, it's hard to distribute the counselors equally to middle schools and high schools, and they are put where they are most needed, which is the high schools. I believe we have 8 on Peninsula, and it's still not as enough because we have a lot of students. We have about 2,000 plus students. So it's just about funding, and we just need more funding from our community members and more people to donate so that we can support students and so that we can get some more counselors.
Okay. Be great. Yep. First, can we give our student a round of applause? We are constantly thinking about how we can better meet the mental health needs of our students. One of the hardest things to accept when you join the school board and you really get into the nitty-gritty of the budget is there's a very small portion of the budget that we actually have a lot of leeway with. The majority, the bulk of our budget, like 75 to 85% of it is fixed as it should be on people costs via negotiations with staff. So there's a very small what's left over that we can maybe tinker with a little bit, but it's very small. That being said, I know we've been looking into seeing if there's a program being offered through LA County, and I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but it adds another layer of mental health support where students can access a mental health therapist remotely. And so it will not displace anything we're already doing. It just adds yet another way to access mental health services. And we're still trying to figure out how that would work in terms of keeping our parents engaged, making it accessible for the students. So that's something that we have been, Ed Services is looking into. The other thing that has come up is last year, the district moved forward with supporting and encouraging everyone in the community at all levels to get BLS certified, so being able to administer basic life support. And another idea that's come up is what if we can do the same thing in terms of allowing our staff, teachers, and community to access the youth mental health first aid course. It's a very short course, and that would also increase the number of adults in our community, teachers, staff, and parents that are able to identify when a student's in crisis and know where to refer them to. So we're doing what we can. We need the community's help. So if you know of a resource that we could tap into, please feel free to share it with us.
Okay, thank you.
And
Go ahead.
so I'd like to, there's a lot of misinformation about how the state funds the Palos Verdes School District. And so I'm former chair of the Assembly Budget Subcommittee on Education Funding, and I want to make sure that everyone has the facts straight. In 2013, the legislature and the governor signed the biggest change in how schools in California are funded. That was called the local control funding formula. The basic idea of the local control funding formula is that districts that have the highest percentage of students in one of the 3 categories, low income, English language learners, or foster kids, that those districts with the highest percentage of students in those 3 categories get what's called a supplemental grant. So everyone gets the same base grant. That's why it's called the base. The base is the same for every school district in the state of California. For every additional student in one of those 3 categories, you get what's called a supplemental grant. If you have more than 55% of students in your district that are in any one of those 3 categories, then you get an additional grant, which is called a concentration grant. A concentration of disadvantage is basically how you can think about it. The reason why Palos Verdes gets less funding than not only neighboring Los Angeles Unified, but even neighboring Torrance Unified, is because we have the privilege of living in one of the nicest communities in the state of California in terms of, income, in terms of the number of foster kids. You know, the only reason why Palos Verdes has, I believe it's about 18%, you know, students in one of those three categories is because of our immigrant students. We have a higher, you know, we have more English language learners. And so we have very few, we do have some low-income students, but we have much lower low-income students in Palos Verdes than in Los Angeles Unified. Just to give you perspective, in Los Angeles Unified, 90% of students fall into one of those three categories: low-income, foster kids, or English language learners. I believe in Palos Verdes Unified, it was less than 20, but more than 15. And so that's the reason why Palos Verdes Unified gets less money. Now, if you're not happy with that, you know, Dr. Coleman talks about school choice. You know, you can choose to go to Torrance Unified, you know, which has a 40% you know, students in those populations, or you can go to LA Unified, which is 90%. But I think, you know, many of us live in Palos Verdes because we know that not only, you know, is there a smaller percent, because we have so high socioeconomics in the state of California, and study after study shows that across the country, the highest performing public schools are strongly correlated with the socioeconomic demographics of the families that make up that school district. But I just wanted to give that basic primer in terms of how California school is. And to make up those differences, that's where the Peninsula Education Foundation is so critical. But you know, if PEF raises about $2 million a year,
Yes.
and your general fund every year is 22 million. 22 million, yeah. So that's just to give you a perspective in terms of, you know, while we love the Peninsula Education Foundation, my family, we always give the recommended amount to support the Ed Foundation. But by and large, the bulk of the funding for the state of California, ever since Proposition 13 passed, which is another story, California used to be in the top 10 in the nation in per pupil funding until Proposition 13 passed in 1978. You know, ever since then, we've been trying to get back. But as Dr. Coleman said, the last 10 years, we were close to the bottom. We've made progress. We're slightly above the national average in per pupil spending at this point, but we still have a long ways to go.
Okay. So that was more than I even was expecting to hear. So that all is good. And I do want to encourage, in terms of the Peninsula Education Fund, you do not have to have a student in the district. I mean, that's the whole point. You know, even when your students graduate out, you should still be giving. And for those who don't have kids in the district, they should be giving. So we should be encouraging that. My other question had to do, and you talked to it, how in terms of your support for AB, your advocacy for AB 1078 for the curriculum. So there's two other bills that you advocated for and that you helped pass. And one was called SB 394, the Master Plan for Healthy, Sustainable, and Climate Resilient Schools. You know, it's electrifying our schools. And so this got passed and is awaiting signature from Governor Newsom as well. So, you know, that got out of the assembly, not out of your committee, but out of the assembly.
Actually, they both got out of my committee also.
Oh, okay. All right. And so I didn't know if you had anything to add. And then the other one was SB 596, School Employees Protection, which was about disciplining any adult. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that.
Sure. Just real quickly on those two bills. So the first bill basically is calling for the state of California to have a master plan to deal with climate readiness, climate preparedness. And it's not just about, electrifying our schools, but it's also about addressing critical issues like extreme heat.
Right.
Like for example, the San Fernando Valley. I mean, they
Air conditioning.
yeah. Well, talk about the need for air conditioning. I mean, they have measured classroom, well, not ground temperatures in sections of their schools, especially where there's a lot of asphalt, over 120 degrees. And so, yeah, and clearly with the realities of climate change becoming increasingly urgent, we need to have plans to address those realities of the climate crisis. The second bill you mentioned is the bill that was addressing the problem of teachers and school employees being attacked, as part of the culture wars, and so that bill made it a misdemeanor to be attacking. We clearly want to protect our teachers and school employees, from being attacked in any way. One last bill I just wanted to add, and it goes directly to one of the most important issues that Palos Verdes Unified, students as well as the large community is facing, is the condition of our schools or our school facilities. School districts throughout the state they meet their facilities needs not through the general fund dollars, but through bond measures. But the way it works is that the local school district needs to pass a bond, and then the state can provide matching funds. But it's depending again on your socioeconomics, it can range from about 50-50 to about 60-40, with 60 coming from the state and 4% coming from locals. That is primarily for low-income school districts. But the fundamental problem is that Palos Verdes, has not supported a local school bond. I thought I saw Lorraine Beckman here.
I tweeted online and we're gonna have to talk right after you.
Yeah, okay. But we need to pass a local school bond. Our school facilities are decrepit. When our Palos Verdes high school students came, when I met with them last year, they talked about their biggest concern was the decrepit condition of their high school bathrooms. And I had an opportunity to visit them with some parents. And the parents told me, "Oh, this looks exactly like what it did back in the 1960s." And so basically, it hasn't been improved since the 1960s or the 1970s. We need our kids deserve better, not only for basic facilities like our bathrooms, but making sure that our schools, our classrooms have 21st century educational technology, so that they are not disadvantaged. That we're investing in our kids and providing the same quality educational facilities as other school districts.
So I did support the last school bond. I'm speaking as a resident of Rancho Palos Verdes. Clearly, most likely, there needs to be a bond measure in our future. I think from my own personal experience up close with that last bond measure, and now having a better understanding of school finance and facilities financing, I'm hopeful that we'll put together a bond package in communication and collaboration with the community, and that it will be much more defined and targeted in terms of priorities of our facilities. Because I think when we think about our most urgent needs, toilets back up all the time, so prioritizing plumbing, HVAC, we have medically fragile students in classrooms that were built in the 50s, so they do not have air conditioning, and that's a really high concern for us. So plumbing, HVAC, a lot of our sites, we can't, even if somebody gave us air conditioning, they don't have the electrical capacity to support air conditioning. So I think I'm hopeful that we will be able to work as a team with all of you. It's going to take everybody in the community, whether you have kids in the district or not, to put together a ballot measure that we can all pass together. But I'm hopeful we're going to make it happen. We've only failed one bond measure in this community, and that gets forgotten.
Okay, I have one more follow-up. this has to do with, in terms of the bathroom. So a lot of times we hear the infrastructure is bad. But what I've also heard from parents that I know is that there's also social media that's been motivating some of the kids to do things in the bathroom to make them lock the bathrooms. I don't know, glue something on anyway. It's very destructive. And so I understand that, that just recently that they added detention. And so now that there's a consequence for some of this social media. So I thought maybe you could talk to that too.
Sure. At Peninsula High School, we have lunchtime detention, which we haven't had in a long time. I actually think that it's going pretty well. Getting teachers the reason to be happy because some of us believe in we've gone pretty far away from consequences for bad behavior, and reasonable consequences for misbehaving are welcome. Gina Coleman, who's our AP, my office, has done a really good job this year. Trying to return the campus to normal. We're through looking glass on COVID, so we all want to return to see on campus, and I think it's fraternities also kids. It's also fraternities.
Oh, being late. Oh. All right, so why don't we start with, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about the bathrooms. Last year, there was like a social media trend where you basically take things out of bathrooms. It wasn't a good trend because people took out sinks, the soap dispensers, anything they could. It was really bad. I don't know if they took a toilet, but they could have. But a lot of our bathrooms on campus are locked due to these reasons for like either vandalization or people smoking or vaping in the bathrooms. They have to kind of close it for cleaning it too, because people do throw food in there, unfortunately. So it's kind of hard because students have concerns about if they go to the restroom, it might take them 5 minutes because they have to walk all the way across campus or find a bathroom that's open because a lot of them close and they're not specifically said which ones are closed or open.
Yeah, so the person I heard from, her son is so overjoyed with the detention because if he's at the bathroom, so we'll get that. So we have Paul DiCarmine who has a comment.
Thank you. This is a new question, if that's okay.
Sure.
So this is for anyone who's willing to answer it. Al brought up the topic of CRT, and I agree. By the textbook definition, it is not being taught in our schools, but CRT doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. For some, it means, for example, teaching about racism, teaching about slavery, or even institutional racism. I assume that topic is covered at some level in California schools. So I guess the question is, how can our elected leaders and our schools better communicate to parents what is and what isn't being taught in our schools?
You want to take it first?
No. I can start by talking about what's happening at the state level. I think many people know that the legislature passed and the governor signed a couple of years ago a high school graduation requirement for ethnic studies to cover one of the four major communities of color: African American, Latino, Asian Pacific Islander, or Native Americans, for a course to cover the experiences and the perspectives of one of the four of those major minority groups as a high school graduation requirement. I know that we're dealing with the same challenges in terms of making sure that we have enough teachers that are qualified to teach those courses in all of our high schools. To that end, we're also encouraging
for those that may not have the resources to provide those courses, to promote the dual enrollment program, where high school students can satisfy some of their high school requirements by taking community college courses. I know that is becoming increasingly popular, but that's some of what's happening at the state level. I would love to hear what's happening in Palos.
Well, in terms of how can parents know what's being taught in schools, generally we did refine our curriculum adoption process in Palos Verdes. It was always transparent and open, but we kind of tinkered with it a little bit to make it even more accessible, to expand the number of hours, the number of days parents can access any curriculum that's being piloted. That being said, for curriculum that's already been passed, you can always reach out to your teacher, to your site principal to ask, hey, what's the curriculum the district is using right now for social studies? It's not a secret. We adopted it openly in public and it's accessible remotely. Ed Services is usually willing to also respond to any queries. So it's not a secret. All public school business is conducted openly in front of the public. So that was a question about how parents can know what we're teaching. The question about, I guess, CRT and how are we digging into these difficult topics, I think it comes down to age appropriateness. The social studies curriculum that we adopted does talk about racism because it's a real part of our history and we can't pretend that it's not. As we get into high school, for example, the ethnic studies course, it does take a deeper, tougher look at the lived experiences of communities as they've immigrated into the United States. And some of those conversations are unpleasant. Some of them do require thinking about, are there systems in place that make it easier for certain groups and more difficult for other groups? Those are tough questions. They should make us uncomfortable. But in our district, again, I'm speaking just broadly speaking, you can access everything through contacting Ed Services or your teacher. Again, the elementary school is going to have a historical perspective. Slavery did happen. Jim Crow era was an important thing. Civil rights movement. You can't teach civil rights movement without talking about our history with slavery. So yeah, I'll say personally, after the George Floyd killing, I did actually read Ibram Kendi's book. What is it called? Stamped. I'm born and raised through California public schools. And I'm sorry, but there were large sections in the book. If you kind of set aside his conclusions, he uses some we might not agree with his conclusions or his take-home message, but there are parts of history that I don't remember learning about Bacon's Rebellion. I didn't remember learning about the Tulsa Massacre. I didn't have a deep understanding of the Trail of Tears. So I think it did kind of make us think, are we doing a fair job of representing the history and the lived experiences of everybody that makes up our crazy and complicated country?
A couple things from a teacher's perspective. Most of us, especially those who release what we do to parents, and I get a calendar for every day that's covered. But I wanted to talk about the ethnic studies because it is kind of a good thing for us. We got a head start on that class. The first year, though, was pretty tough, but I don't think there's been a course we've ever taught that's scrutinized ethnic studies, even with members, district staff saying, well, if we change the name, it's just too ethnic. It's just a comment that somebody made. But from a teacher standpoint, a lot of the course content for that class in particular that has gotten through public records requests, the net result being that at least at Peninsula, the teacher who piloted the program decided after she didn't want to live in that public arena and quit the class, job. But it's not, that is a common response that people don't. And I actually think that that's intended on the part of those folks who have a teacher for every single thing, is trying to get us to stop teaching that way, which we won't do. And I'll just add everything I've learned historically about our country and about racism and history, not everything, but most important thing in school. There were people teaching me, and I graduated in 1985. That's where I learned history. So I suppose elements of CRT were being taught in 1985 as well. This isn't a new thing. We would like to pretend that it's a new thing, that educators are telling kids about our actual history. And those words.
Okay, so we're gonna go to the audience, but we have, Joan Davidson on Zoom, and she's anxious. She's been waiting and anxious to ask a question.
All right, can you hear me, Ann?
Yep.
Okay, great. Two quick things. I hope that reasonable parents will always give those who we don't agree with some respect, because I was at the meeting that was just referenced, and there are a lot of people for religious reasons don't want certain things read to their children. That's all. But I wanted to talk to Mr. Muratsuchi regarding all these high-density housing bills that are getting passed. And I have to thank him for not voting for them. And we should all appreciate that, because it was very important that he represented us in this community. The problem I have right now is I was at the PV Estates Town Hall meeting Tuesday night, and people in Palos Verdes Estates are furious, very upset.
Joan, this is
Yes.
school, so we're not.
Right, I'm getting there. That's why I'm talking.
Okay, so ask your question.
So, all right. Well, it pertains to Palos Verdes Estates has CCNRs, but someone wants to use our school land, a real estate developer, to meet the high density housing, and specifically Malaga Cove. So I would like to, could you give a few minutes of a discussion or give us your thoughts on if cities cannot reach the goals set out, are they going to, this government, state government going to say, well, you've got a lot of school land out there, we're going to just take it? Because the new Senate bill that passed is talking about by right. And is it by right then that the state can say you have to use your school land? Because I would like that to never happen.
I have a question, so we'll let Muratsuchi answer.
I think he understands. Can school land be demanded?
He's ready now to answer.
All right. Thank you, Joan, for your question. So as of now, the state laws, the rush of state laws that have been passed to try to address the affordable housing crisis by building more housing everywhere, anywhere, whether we like it or not, is still respecting, local zoning. So if the Malaga Cove property is not zoned for residential, then you cannot build housing that is not zoned residential. However, every city is being increasingly challenged to identify more land to build more housing. And so I don't know what the Malaga Cove property is zoned for. I assume it's not zoned for residential. If it's not zoned for residential, as of today, you shouldn't have to worry about housing being built there. Sorry, I can't get more definitive because I'm not aware of any laws that would allow for housing to be built if it's not zoned.
That's fine. Okay, so we'll take a question from the audience here. Okay, well, you guys want to work it out, or wait and see how come up here?
So I want to say, Sara, I love what you have to say. I'm also an immigrant to this country, and I loved the things you have to say. So, and then I do feel like you can't ever put people in a box. You definitely can't put me in a box. And this is what, this is what the country is. This is what the country is built on. It's a melting pot of different points of view, and different people, different countries, and different backgrounds. And I think that's really important that we come together when we have issues. And so the book, I had lunch with 366 people last Saturday. I'm very much for women's rights, and I'm very much for family. And so I don't know anybody who wants to ban a book. So I wouldn't let my children read hardcore porn. Yeah, so my question is, here's my question, I'm gonna read you from this book. And then, I'm gonna read one little passage, and I'm gonna ask you, do you think this is appropriate at elementary school? Okay. Masturbation is when you touch ourselves in the middle parts, when we get tingly and feeling. So that's just one small little part of many of the bits in this book. So do you honestly think talking about your anus when you rub it has a good feeling and the hole that's your vagina and all this in elementary school children is appropriate? That's my question.
There are good questions for me. I think one of the biggest challenges we have right now is in our school district, we do not have a book in the selection policy. The California Department of Education on the website lists that every school district needs to articulate how books are selected, whether they're selected for the library collection of the school or whether they're in the teacher's classroom. And until teachers have that guidance and support and parents have that idea of what's going to be read and what's available, we're kind of in a quandary. A teacher can be attacked for reading a particular book, and a parent can feel very uncomfortable and not knowing what's going to be read. I do know that the book that's been called up right now is being looked into in the school district, and we lost our superintendent this spring. And that is the most important piece of a school district, is having a superintendent. That's your ship's captain. So it was very important that we focus our time and energy on hiring a superintendent that can continue to uphold the standard of education here in Palos Verdes. So we devoted a lot of time and necessary energy into making sure we hired the right person. We also lost our deputy superintendent of education services and our secondary schools director around the same time, which often happens when you have a change in the superintendent.
But Sarah.
So the first priority, allow me my time. So I have to answer I have to be careful and respectful. It's a deliberative body, so I'm going to be listening to the community. I'm happy to hear your input on it. I appreciate it. So we've got the two biggest pieces. The first piece of superintendent, and she's going to be working on hiring and filling those positions in ed services. And then our ed services team will be working with PVFA and librarians and the community to put together a book selection policy. It will be debated and discussed openly in public. Anyone in our community is welcome to share what they think is appropriate or inappropriate. We have to make sure our books in our classrooms and in our schools are inclusive. Everyone's perspective is included. Every student does need to see themselves in the content. At the same time, it has to be developmentally appropriate. So I'm gonna leave there.
All right, we have a question on Zoom. Mayron, you've been waiting?
Yeah, I have a two-part question for Dr. Sara Deen and our assembly member. The recent admission results from previous year for UC system show a sharp drop in our school, and that's partly due to the not looking at SAT scores and ACT scores, and also possibly because we are an affluent area code. So with all this focus on equity and diversity, if those are the reasons, Dr. Deen, how do you think isn't it going to adversely affect our schools ranking? But my question in particular with the assembly member is, do we as a party believe in equal opportunity, or do we believe in equal outcome? Because if we believe in equal opportunity, our focus should be on providing more resources to underrepresented communities so they can compete with more affluent areas like Palos Verdes. But if we believe in equal outcome, which I don't, it means that when you look at the percentage of students admitted to university, California system, yes, there are underrepresented Latinos, and there are overrepresented Asian Americans because they excel in academics. So we need to cut back on Asian American students and increase Latino admissions. And that, again, is going to adversely affect schools like Peninsula High School of Palos Verdes. I, as a parent, and also as a former University of California system, I can tell you, you can provide equal opportunity, you're not going to get the same outcome. So I'm all for providing equal opportunity, but I do not believe in equal outcome.
Mayor, we are running out of time. We have your questions, so we'll let the panel answer it.
Okay, I can start and then defer to Dr. Deen. More specifics on what's happening in Palos Verdes Unified, but I did request and receive data on UC admissions for our Palos Verdes Peninsula and PV High students in recent years, and I haven't seen any dramatic drop in percentages. In fact, it almost looks like there is a quota of the same, pretty similar numbers of students being accepted, especially from the most competitive UC campuses, UCLA and UC Berkeley, over the last 5 years. Now, I share your concern about the UC-wide policy of disregarding the SATs, combined with a official University of California policy that the top 9% of every high school would be guaranteed admission to at least one of the 9 University of California undergraduate campuses. So that's a long-winded answer that may not sound like an answer to you. I mean, your specific question about do I believe in equal opportunity versus equal outcome, I would say clearly equal opportunity, and that California voters clearly, restated their opposition to restoring affirmative action in public higher education admissions with the ballot proposition, I believe, in the last couple of years, as well as, of course, the United States Supreme Court also recently ruling that quotas continue to be illegal. That is not what the University of California does, but there is an effort by the regions of the University of California to ensure or to work toward the University of California campuses being more reflective of the diversity of the state's population. One clear way that I always emphasize to our Palos Verdes students that our students can use to our advantage to go to the UC campuses of their choice is to take advantage of the clear University of California policy to encourage more community college transfer students. There is the acceptance rate to UCLA from El Camino College honors students, I believe, is higher than 80%. And so while it's become increasingly difficult, almost like feeling like a crapshoot to go from high school directly into the most competitive UC campuses, there is a clear pathway if you consider going through our community colleges.
I would just add that I think our school district here, specifically in PVPUSD, has always believed and upheld that we believe in improving access to our most competitive courses and not removing opportunities. And that's why we've consistently pushed for maintaining more pathways and making sure kids have access to accelerating as they choose. Both of our high school campuses have the most amazing college and career centers, staffed by people who are absolute experts in how to get into the college of your dreams. And I attended PV High had their college night just Thursday night. I think it was only 3 days ago. Feels like a long time. But they had the admissions officer from UC Berkeley there, the dean of admissions from USC, and many others. I think there were 8 admissions officers altogether who described in detail how students can make themselves look most appealing to the college of their dreams or wherever they're trying to go. how to prepare a holistic application in light of the changes that we've gone to being SAT and test optional at many schools. Point being, the landscape has changed a little bit, but in PVPUSD, we got you. We are working very closely with admissions offices to make sure that our kids have access to the supports they need and the information they need to be successful. And I think the other thing we've been talking more and more about this in this community is acknowledging that there are multiple types of intelligence and there are lots of different paths to living a meaningful life. The college, community college path is a really great path of saving money, spending some extra time at home as a parent. I would do that. And also for a career in the trades. We have lots of great trade opportunities around here. You can live a very fulfilling life. We have students, I had a student in spring. She had exited her from Penn High or PV High and gone to Rancho Del Mar. She knew she always wanted to be a fashion designer, no, a hairdresser. She wants to be a cosmetologist. And she has a program that she's already enrolled in. So she finished her credits and started her path. I saw her a few months ago. She's extremely happy. Her parents are super proud of her. So we also need to start embracing. And I know that's hard in this community sometimes. I understand. I do come from a family where education is important, but it's important as a parent. But I also acknowledge that my children's paths may look different than mine. And I want them to be well. I want them to be happy more than anything else.
We also have Paul DiCarmine. You wanted to add to this?
I have a fresh question if we're taking any questions.
Oh, are you answering this question or do you have a question?
I have a new question at the.
Okay, let me just see if Jim wants to. Okay, go ahead. And this will, I think this might be our last question.
Thank you. First to Joan, I'm sorry if you felt disrespected at the March 8th meeting. But with respect to student mental health and the culture wars, after the March 8th meeting, I talked to Dr. Chernis, and he assured me that the kids are okay. It's the parents the culture wars affect the most. And so I'm wondering if anybody here, has any insight on that. It felt reassuring to hear, but I'm, a little bit concerned that it might not be true or completely accurate.
I would say the kids are affected dramatically by what they receive, especially members of our LGBTQ perceive that there's a hostile environment. There are folks who don't want their voices to be heard. And they also look at the discussion on both sides of the aisle. And then they see adults behaving badly. And they see adults resolving situations that least effective. Not by communicating, but by just hurling things back and forth. Again, both sides. So I think the adults could do a better job of having the discussion be more civil. Students to feel less that this is an issue of. I think if I had any dream, it would be the biggest to teach our students that adults can have reasonable discussions about human topics.
I was talking to Dr. Deen earlier and doing that, and I was just saying how that I feel like as a student, the student-to-student relationship is really good. I don't feel like anyone is left out or excluded. We have plenty of clubs on campus for different ethnicities, for every interest, and they truly do accept everyone. There's no application for a club. Anyone who is interested in a club is entitled to join that club and to be a part of that club. And I think there's a lot of respect at Peninsula, especially with each student. And I believe every student respects each other, and you don't hear a lot of students being singled out. And I think, honestly, the students are very mature, and it's just a great environment to be on Peninsula.
There's a question. Well, let me just say, it is 4:26. We end in 4 minutes. Oh,
just
okay.
clarification.
Can you come up here then?
Oh, sure.
Dr. Deen, it seems like, for clarification, you're saying that the Board of Education has heard parents and their concern about books in our school district, and you're working toward that answer, but because of bureaucracy, you're taking a little longer than some parents might want, but you are hearing parents. And and also just to add on to that one of the things that you're also saying, Tim, is that with this cultural war that parents are, that other parents are talking about, that we're not really focusing on what's best for the kids, that we're actually focusing on more political agenda. And that's, I think I'm hearing that you're saying that's a concern.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's just bureaucracy. We have to do it the right way. And that means bringing together our educational partners. We have to make sure that our teachers, librarians, parents, and district are all on the same page as we work on this selection policy. I think it's going to be a challenging conversation. I don't think it's going to be an easy one. And you want to set yourself up for success. It means securing, making sure we have education services in place with superintendent established. But yes, I'm looking forward to it because the gray area, and it feels like it's just taking so long that it gives time for anxieties to rise. But I'm hopeful we're going to get there. And I appreciate the community's patience. We absolutely understand both teachers and parents who are feeling concerned. This is challenging for lots of people and to students as well. I think what the speaker might have been referencing in saying that it's not a problem with the students is I find the students actually have an easier time talking across difference. I've been in the ethnic studies class and I've seen students engage where they're coming from different political and social perspectives, and they're able to have really impressive, critical conversations across difference, dialogue. Yes, so we need to embrace it.
We only add to that I think part capable of doing that part because of the education. Because of the changes that we've made in education over the last 30 years. When I was in high school, we were still celebrating Columbus. And we've changed a lot. A lot of things have changed over the course of that time. A lot of them have meant students are kinder to each other. Some of that came from schools. Not to pat ourselves too much on the back.
Okay, so we're at the end of our program, but what I would like is our panelists to take this time for each one of you, and if you've already done it or feel like you've already done it, but if you've talked to you've listened to the other panelists and you've talked, and what are you coming out of this meeting as what you think is the top critical issue with our schools? If something hasn't been said or learned something new, give us 20 seconds, 30 seconds, just to, what it felt like to be on this panel. And I'm going to start with Sydney because she wasn't on originally, but she has been an extreme asset.
Thank you again for having me. I think that as a student, the most pressing issue is our facilities, just because the other issues that I've talked about, such as mental health, we are getting help with that. A lot of our leadership classes on campus are doing stuff to help with that, and Alcove has stepped in an outstanding organization, so I feel like we're starting to get better at that. And also our CCC is planning a career fair currently, so we're doing plenty of those for the other two issues, but I think our facilities is something that we need outside help from, which is kind of hard, and I think that's the most pressing issue.
Following on our students and Sydney's lead, I want to say that I'm working on a bill to pass, to get on next year's November ballot, a $14 billion statewide school construction bond measure, so that we can provide matching funds to local school districts. But in order to get those state funds to local districts, we need to pass a local school bond here in Palos Verdes. I had the experience when I served on the Torrance School Board that we first failed to pass a school bond in 2006, and then in 2007 we came back and passed not one but two school bond measures. And since then, the Torrance Unified School facilities have dramatically improved. It takes a community-wide effort. It's not just something that's going to be led by our school board and our school district, our superintendent. It takes a community to fix our schools, and I look forward to working with everyone to do that.
I think I'm just doubling down on my commitment to make sure that when I'm sitting up at the dais or I'm moving around in the community, that I keep our students front and center and really think about their voices, the things that Raina brought up, that you brought up, like, focusing on what really is impacting students in the classrooms and at school sites, not what grown-ups here and there are claiming is happening, but really focusing on what is their experience, what is it that they really need right now, and finding ways to support student voice more. We need more meaningful inclusion of student voice when we are crafting policies in our district, engaging them in conversations is really important. So I'm going to be thinking about this.
I would only add that PVPA is prepared to fully support any measure to try to get a bond passed. On campus, we will bank, we will do everything we can do to help. Because that's something I think every member of our community can find. And I also wanted to, since all members of the community, the mood, since we've settled our contract, PVPA members is decidedly value issue. I think also with the hiring of Dr. Serrano, which we initially was very good to us. It's been a really lovely start of the school year. People are a bit happier this year, to say the least. And certainly we're on September 1st.
Paul?
Thank you. What I'm hearing and what I think and what I think we know is that as a community, we need to buckle down, work together, and listen to other perspectives if we want to get meaningful things done. This will obviously be critical for passing the much-needed bond measure, among the other important work that we need to do. Thanks.
Thank you. And I don't know, Rita, or I want to put you on the spot. You sat through the whole meeting and you were going to go. So did you have any last comments for us as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge what Dr. Deen said. I agree that I think it's really important to listen to student voices. I think we have so much to say just across the spectrum. I think youth opinions do vary from those of like adults and older people, just because like this is the generation that we're going to be growing up, and we're the ones who have to kind of cultivate the environment that we want to see, whether it be environmental concerns that I'm particularly passionate about or anything else. I think it's just really important to see and promote youth civic engagement and to provide platforms for younger people to be able to advocate for what they want to see change. Thank you.
All right. That's the end. Thank you.